Hello, everybody. This is your right geek and honorary man king here with #1 Marmaduke fan to talk about Iron Man. Now, the first question that might occur to you is, why are we not discussing Iron Man #9? And the reason is that it was essentially a recap issue. Basically, if you have already read the Korvac saga back in the Avengers comics from the 70s, nothing in this issue was going to be new to you. Now, Marm, you said in the pre-show that you actually did not know that information, so this issue was new for you. So, do you have any just brief comments on that issue before I move on to the real content of the stream?
Right. So since Korvac is kind of a new character to me, like one thing I kind of like is how when they get into his origin story, there's almost a cosmic horror aspect to it where he betrays his people, and then the alien race that he sold out to, they treat him like a slave and turn him into a machine basically as punishment. Right. So not only does he have to live with being a traitor, he's been unmanned figuratively and literally. And there's some cool stuff where they bring back the old school Golden Age Human Torch, who's also an android. So there's this kind of like connection where both of them are like these sort of like perfect android beings, and both of them kind of have like reasons to be mad at Tony Stark. So at the same time, it's a lot of like catch up on complex Marvel history that you may have missed out on. So for me, that was helpful. And I actually kind of like when Cantwell is writing his villain. I feel like Cantwell's doing the best job at writing Korvac, because Korvac has, like this insane religious idea to destroy all life and turn us into crystals, so we don't have war and death anymore, right? But then when he gets into his evil speeches, his motivations make sense as a villain. So like that's the best part of it. And the dumbest part of it is Patsy Walker having flashbacks to getting sent to the principal's office in high school. What? I kind of wish he'd just like wrap. I don't know. I kind of wish we'd get to the the match between Tony and Korvac. But for me, this was actually it was an okay issue.
Right. For me, since it was stuff that I was already aware of and knew, I was just like, I can skip this one. So,
and no Iron Man, like for basically two issues in a row, no Iron Man. Which, again, I'll repeat what I said the last time we had no Iron Man, which is in the Iron Man comic, you should at least check up on him. Yeah. Like, where is he? Update, is he still alive? Like, like I said, back in the 80s when Rhodey was Iron Man because Tony was too drunk to function in that role, they still like checked up on Tony. Oh, where's Tony? Oh, he's in this homeless shelter, or he ended up in the hospital or in jail or something. They would check up on him, and wouldn't forget that he existed. So so anyway, that is our comment on Iron Man #9. Basically, if you're kind of a newish reader to Marvel, so you're not really familiar with the Bronze Age comics about Korvac, then this would be an issue that will help you catch up on his history. But if you have read the Bronze Age stuff, it's really one that you can skip. The only thing you really need to know from it is that Korvac basically tries to recruit the original Human Torch to his cause, and it doesn't work, so then he just straight up enslaves him. So that's pretty much the only new part of the plot you need to know. And if you know that, you can just go on to the next issue without being too lost about what's going on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about this annual, which has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on in Cantwell's comics. It is some other storyline entirely that apparently is going to be running throughout the summer based on the kind of guide list that's in the back of the comic. But when I read this comic, I said, hey, this is actually a good comic. So let's talk about this comic. This is Infinite Destinies, Iron Man versus Quantum.
All right, so where should we begin on this, Marm, you think?
Well, it's kind of overall like an adventure issue, right? Like Tony's got to go take out a bad guy he's mad at, and it's set up kind of a setup also for an event involving the Infinity Stones. I'd kind of like to just go through like the thrust of the plot, because I mostly like it. It's mostly a good comic. There are only a couple little quibbles I had, but I actually enjoyed it as just like a rousing, good adventure story with some neat setups for other stuff. Like, do you have any comments on, like, I don't know the event this is for, so do you have any like insight on how this is fitting in with what's going on in the Marvel universe that might be helpful for people?
I actually do not. I think this might have something to do with whatever's going on in Heroes Reborn right now, but that event is not even finished yet. So, like I honestly have no idea where this is going. And there really hasn't been a lot. Like, I'm a Marvel insider. I go to the Marvel website and I read their little articles about what they're putting out and so on, just to get an idea of like what it is that they're advertising or they're really pushing. And I really haven't seen much discussion at all on the Marvel website about this Infinite Destinies plot. So unfortunately, I really don't have any insight that I can offer here. I think that this is something that's going to fly under the radar completely unnoticed because they're just not talking about it. Basically, all the talk is about the Hellfire Gala right now, which is a trash fire of proportions. So I don't know. I don't know what's going through their heads and why they're not even explaining what this is or what we should think about it, or even if it's like taking place in the 616 universe, or is it an alternate, is it an Elseworld? We don't know. Is this canon or not? They haven't explained. So, but I enjoyed it. So, yeah. So we can talk about that. All right. So the plot is basically that it starts with Tony and Miles Morales working together to fight these little green men here.
The Moloids, servants of the Mole Men, old school fans of Fantastic Four will remember.
Servants of the Mole Men.
And they're the younger generation. So the old generation of Moloids were actually like fighting and taking over New York, and these guys are all obsessed with Seinfeld, and they just want to be tourists, which is kind of goofy. It's like, hey, the joke is, hey, they like Seinfeld. Hey, they like Seinfeld. Yeah. Oh boy. That made me cringe a little bit, but it's basically just like the little intro problem, right? And so after Iron Man and Miles Morales take care of it, Miles Morales confesses that he was recently captured and tortured by a villain that Tony Stark isn't familiar with. And this really gets in Tony's craw, because basically it means that there's a powerful guy operating in his backyard that he hasn't dealt with or that he wasn't aware of, right? Like, don't you hurt the kids in my backyard, basically. So I like this maybe paternal instinct Tony has to help out a younger hero and like go trash stuff, because, like the kid, wouldn't occur to him to like just go kick down the door and beat up everything. But Tony has a lot more of that direct destroy everything mentality. It's almost like they're even doing a better job here of doing what Cantwell was trying to do in the other new Iron Man comics, where there's this theme that Tony feels a little distant and out of touch. So he's trying to get back to basics and trying to get back to heroing, like realizing, while I was fighting spacemen, there's a bad guy in New York who's hurting kids. That's a nice little down to earth thing for Tony to do, I think.
And I think that's principally, that is definitely principally what excited me about this issue. As I said on Twitter, I am absolutely here for a comic in which Tony goes all Papa Bear and says, you're torturing kids in my backyard? Well, I'm going to F you up, that felt to me very Tony. I buy it 100% that he would do that. So, and it is in fact accomplishing, as you say, it is accomplishing the thing that Cantwell is trying to do, which is to bring Tony back to his roots and his basics. Not fighting the spacemen, but fighting street level heroes that are threatening people in his own city. So
the bad guy is called the Assessor, and he essentially collects data, which means if he captures you, he'll start torturing you and start assessing all that data. To get to the Assessor, Tony has to win a slug match with Quantum, who's a villain who appears to have the ability to kind of use teleportation. And it's kind of like a neat setup where Tony is doing internal monologue. He's explaining his plan is basically to do like a full frontal assault to intimidate the enemy and trust that his armor is invincible tech. And then the problem is Quantum can basically phase inside his armor and neutralize that power. So Tony thought he was like on top of his game and on top of the world, and then Quantum throws power at him that throws Tony for a loop. He has to push through that and take out the Assessor in his home base, essentially. And there's some fun stuff, like Tony's caught in a series of death traps, so he has to think of a couple of creative plans to get out of a couple death traps. So that aspect of it it's very just a fun, straightforward. Tony's got to go stop the bad guy. Tony's got to beat the death trap machines. That feels like very much like a classic Marvel comic.
Yeah. Eat the human cruise missile. You may have guessed it. This whole thing has got my dander up. So him being all pissed off. Like I said, I was absolutely here for this. I was here for badass mother effer Tony Stark. Running numbers is your thing, right? That and torturing kids. Tell me, how do you like your odds right now? I was like, this is good. I like this.
Yeah.
Very Tony. Yeah.
Maybe one little quibble I had is as he was like bursting in and doing his internal monologue, sometimes it was like the setup where he's thinking, oh yeah, I've got a brilliant plan. I've got drones outside, and then wah, wah, wah. he starts getting his butt kicked really quickly. Like almost kind of like, he was proud of himself, and then boom, here's the fall. Actually, that kind of works because he was kind of like too cocky and sure of himself. And I kind of like the detail that Quantum. I got the impression that he knows Quantum, and that Quantum pulled a new power out, has a new power that Tony wasn't expecting. And I liked his little comment that, superheroing is a business where you need momentum, because if you lose momentum, you lose your edge. And if you lose your edge, you're dead. Right. So it's almost like Tony's fighting style of overwhelming superior firepower. The way he fights fits with the way he thinks about fighting.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I liked about this issue is that Tony was coming in. I don't know if cocky is the way to explain it. I think it was just that he was so angry that he wasn't thinking it through. That's kind of how I interpreted it. Yeah. So, but once he realized that, I wasn't thinking. Then one thing I like about this issue is it seemed like once he experienced that first fall, then he started fighting smart, and that's something that has been definitely been missing in the Cantwell comics for sure. I have yet to see in the Cantwell comics any time when Tony's not just trying to solve things by putting his fist through it, where he's actually trying to think smart and trying to outthink his enemy instead of trying to outpunch him. Cantwell's run does not have that at all, but this issue did. And I was like, yes, finally, somebody understands that while Tony's armor makes him unbelievably powerful in a physical sense, his real power is his intelligence, right? And so you need to have him fighting villains in ways that are intelligent and strategic and using his powers of perception and calculation, and not just the straight up contests of brawn. Basically, that's not what Iron Man.
Simple things like he realizes Assessor is an AI, so he has to shut down the internet basically, so that the Assessor can't just like download himself and get away that way, right? He is using his tech powers are kind of like a superpower, where because he's so smart, he can have the technology he needs to win the day. But there has to be like an element of it where the little kid who's reading it understands what Tony is doing, even if he's using smart language to describe it. And I guess the final reveal is that Quantum starts screaming and reacting as something appears in kind of like the void in his chest. And I'm led to believe that that's something that has something to do with the Infinity Stones choosing him as a master or something, mostly because of like the little bonus material they have, like explaining the Infinity Stones and hinting at some of the people who can control them now. So I guess that aspect of it, it's like a little setup of dun dun dun, what will happen next. It's just a little bit like tacked on the end. There's going to be some adventure involving this Infinity Stones coming up. So my overall feeling is it's a fun annual issue, some neat internal monologue, and my favorite part of it is the Tony Stark as Papa Bear aspect.
Because I'm going to destroy him.
I just remembered, because he's talking about it here. He thinks about the cave a lot. It also seems like Tony's become more guilty about being a weapons guy. Like in the old Tales of Suspense, it's more like, I'm an American. I fight communists. Of course I build weapons. And now it's a little bit more like Tony is guilty over his past as a weapons guy. And at the same time, there's this feeling that I was wasting my life, but Yin Sang was a good guy who just got caught up in things, right? So they're kind of playing up this guilt aspect as something pushing him forward, similar to how Uncle Ben's death pushes Spider-Man forward.
Right. And and that's something that, that is true to his evolution as well, because in the early Tales of Suspense, it was, Tony just acting for the good of America as he understood it. But as his canon proceeds, then he has some experiences that basically change his mind about what he's doing, and he starts to have doubts about what he's doing. So that's where the guilt and the desire to atone for what he feels is the destruction that he has wrought upon the world. That's where that starts to come in, and that's something that in future videos we can talk about. For example, one key issue, at least on that development, is Iron Man number 78 in the first volume, because, and hopefully I'm remembering the number correctly, but that is the issue where it basically tells a story of Tony going to Vietnam and seeing in Vietnam what the war is doing to the soldiers who are fighting it, and also the local Vietnamese. And that fundamentally changes his view about whether this war is the right thing to do, right? So it comes. So I saw that. Now, I have said on my blog and elsewhere that I don't think that the fact that he was a military contractor early in his career, I don't think that that's necessarily a sin. I think that he was serving as that for, I think, noble motives, which the early comics, when they start taking him through that transition from weapons contractor to, no, I want to do other things now, I'm abandoning that aspect of my life, they still, those early writers still gave him the respect to say, but when he was a weapons contractor, he thought he was doing it for the right reasons. So So I've said that there's nothing like inherently sinful about his being a weapons contractor in the 60s. But do I buy that now Tony would feel guilty about that aspect of his life? Absolutely, because that's how he's developed in the canon. So this was, so yes, when he starts talking about his guilt over that, I said, yes, once again, this writer understands how Tony works, how he thinks. And this page that I'm kind of paging through right now is probably my favorite page in the issue. Is him talking about his guilt.
And it's a nice parallel where what he's guilty about, making weapons. He makes weapons, but he's not making weapons in and of themselves. He's making himself stronger in a way. It's almost like he's still doing the same thing, but he's doing it in a better way now, where he has more control about how these things are used.
And it's good, and it's interesting that you say control, because that is one of his biggest issues. Is what I think what he realized when he had that experience in Vietnam that was talked about in Iron Man 78. I think what he realized is that by putting these weapons out there in the world, they're out there, and he has no control over how they're being used and what they're being used for. And like fundamentally, that's what bothers him. Is he wants the things that he makes to be used for good, right? But the problem, if you're an engineer and a technologist, right, and you put things out there in the world, after that, you put things out there in the world. After that, you have no control over them, and that's the thing that drives Armor Wars. That's the thing that drives him to drink in Demon in a Bottle, even because the thing that I'm about to do the video that has been a long time in coming, and that's discussing Demon in a Bottle, and how that whole story worked. But the principal thing that drove him to drink was a loss of control over his own technology. So yeah, the fact that you said control is exactly right. He wants control over what the things he makes do in the world. And anytime there is a threat of that loss of control, then he's severely bothered by that.
There's kind of a nice parallel between that and kind of like the problem of, do we have all of this technology to make our lives better, or do we have all this technology that makes our lives worse? And what kind of makes Tony, not Iron Man, but Tony Stark, what makes him a superheroic character is that he's kind of finding a way to arise above that problem by creating technology that lets him fight evil, but he doesn't let anyone else use that technology for evil purposes, right? It adds kind of like a neat childlike fantasy heroic element to him, while also touching on maybe like this sad problem of the 20th and 21st century.
Right. And in some comics in Volume 1, we get some information that when he was a child, he read fantasies of knights in shining armor. So he wants to be that. So he wants to be that, and he wants to have control over what his creations, what they wreak in the world. And that is one of his principal motivations. So basically, we can say that, or to put it another way, we can say that the story of Tony Stark is a story of taking responsibility and being accountable for what you do, how you impact the world. So this was a fun issue, a good comic, and it actually, I think it gets the character of Tony Tony Stark sorry for misspeaking, but it gets the character of Tony Stark mostly right. You know, he's a little more in this. He's a little more kind of sarcastic, modern than he used to be, but I can deal with that as long as the writers acknowledge both his desire to protect younger heroes, to be that papa bearer and step in the breach in their defense, and also and also he's always constantly atoning for what he feels are his sins, what he feels are the things that he has done wrong. Yeah, so it was a great issue. Yeah.
Now, okay, that was the annual for the most recent volume of Iron Man, right? Because what was weird to me is we haven't gotten like 9 issues yet, but we already have an annual. So I'm guessing like they started the year with an annual, and then that was the start of the new series and the new numbering.
No, this was released first week of June. So
okay,
I think it's just annual. They just put out an annual every year because annual means every year, regardless of where you are.
Okay, yeah. Regardless of where you are in the numbering. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I called this stream "Time Traveling Through the Iron Man Canon" because basically we're starting with what came out most recently. So that annual we were just discussing released in a couple weeks ago. And now we are going to talk about something that was released in the early 2000s. So this is about a 20-year-old set of comics. And what we're going to cover here is an arc called the Manhunt Arc. And Warzord is here, I just noticed.
Hey, Warzord.
Yeah, hey, Warzord, how are you? And he says, I think this is good. Always thought that a Batman Iron Man crossover could be really deep with both of their mental scars. I agree. For sure, that would be quite interesting, I think. So yeah, what we're going to talk about now is the Manhunt Arc, aka one of Tony Stark's really bad weeks. All right, so where would you like to start here?
Maybe give people just like a quick overview of like what this storyline is, and then maybe do you want to go through each issue in the arc?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
All right. So I'm not familiar a lot with this time period. I kind of like this era of comics from the 2000s. It's like they hit a nice sweet spot of writing comics for smart kids, but they weren't writing comics for dumb adults quite yet.
Yeah.
And we get a few hints of what's been going on in Tony Stark's life throughout these issues. But basically, Pepper's married to Happy. And throughout this 5-issue arc, Tony has to investigate a terrorist who potentially stole his technology, or it could have been leaked from his own company. For most of the mystery, we're not sure what happened, but a terrorist uses some of his technology to blow up the Chinese embassy, kill about 100 people are killed, and Tony's furiously investigating this to try to shut it down. Overall, I just kind of like, without a ton of spoilers, I'd say it's a rousing, good adventure story.
Right. So basically, the rising action happens when basically the Chinese embassy is destroyed in Washington, D.C. by a mysterious weapon of unknown provenance, which turns out to be Stark Tech. So remember what I was saying before about how Tony wants to have absolute control over what his technology does in the world at large? Yeah. So, of course, he's going to be furiously investigating how this happened and how this was leaked out into the world. So, because that fits right in with one of his major motivations. And yes, in the meantime, this arc also is kind of picking up some things that have been that are continuing from previous issues. Some things you might need to know context-wise in order to understand some of the things that are going on in this arc. A few issues back, Tony went to basically an Eastern Bloc country in which there was a civil war going on, essentially, and there was a dictator that was basically oppressing certain populations in the country. And Tony goes there, witnesses a massacre, and also discovers that the rebels have some of his tech. They have basically a suit of armor that is designed to basically keep the wearer alive and awake, come what may. Essentially, it basically injects you with drugs and so on to keep you awake and functioning, and basically until the fight is over. And one of the rebels actually puts this on, and it basically tortures her because she really just wants to die, because she's now like a half machine, half human, whatever, and it's torturing her. She's living in pain. And she, in previous issues, she asked Tony to basically kill her, and Tony couldn't do it. So she, in revenge, she kidnaps and attacks Pepper. And unfortunately, at the time, Pepper was pregnant, and she ends up killing the baby. So there's that kind of happened before this arc. So you'll see like the consequences of that going on in this arc as well. So that's kind of an interesting personal thing that's going on in the background, where Pepper has lost her baby, and that is causing problems in her and Happy's marriage, because she has not told Happy yet that she was pregnant when she was attacked. So there's this whole, they're having relationship issues, and Happy is drinking because of it. And of course, Tony has some things to say about that, because he's got personal experience with that issue. So, so there's that soap opera going on behind the scenes of the story as well, which, and it's pretty interesting, because that soap opera actually leads to, without getting into the spoilers, it leads to a plot pivotal decision on Pepper's part. So, but let's get into like the individual issues. So issue number 1, we have the attack on the embassy. Oh yeah, and also Tony is seeing this girl. Her name is Rumiko. And
very 12-year-old sexy scene. Every 12-year-old will be saying, "Whoa, this is the sexiest thing I've ever seen."
Yeah, that Rumiko is kind of the Saya. She's, basically a trust fund kid, essentially. So a trust fund kid who basically does whatever she wants because she can, essentially. And she's gotten involved with Tony here. But she's got some problems with how Tony's life interferes with their relationship, essentially.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention another contextual thing. You'll notice in this arc that people know who Tony is. They know that he's Iron Man. That's because a couple of issues back, he revealed that he was Iron Man, and it was kind of a goofy way to reveal it, but also kind of perfectly Tony, because he reveals that he is Iron Man basically by saving a little kid's dog who was about to get run over by a car. Like, he was out there and he happened to witness this. So without thinking, he jumps out there, puts his armor on, and saves the dog. And then from then on, everyone knows that he's Iron Man. So if you're wondering why everyone knew, that's the reason. So, Okay. Yeah, so as he's having this 12-year-old sexy moment here with Rumiko, he's talking about Happy. So this is a soap opera I was talking about. So he says, I can't stand to watch Happy spiral down like this. He's drinking his life away even faster than I did. You can't help him until he really wants to stop. Tony says, I know that too well, but I'm not good with helplessness. And then Rumiko decides that he really needs to be alone and leaves. So he turns on the TV and he learns about the attack on the embassy. So he shows up in his Iron Man armor to help. And we discover as we're working our way through the rubble here that there is a daycare in the basement of this building, right? So there's a bunch of kids that have been injured or killed by this, which you know how mad Tony got in that annual about Miles Morales being tortured. Yes, he does not like just in general kids being tortured or endangered in any way. And as he's combing through the rubble, he kind of works out on his own what sort of weapon actually did this. And he realizes it. You can tell he realizes it before it becomes more commonly known that this is something that he has made. So right here, this is him coming to the realization as he's looking at the damage pattern of this weapon. That's him realizing.
I didn't pick that up. That's a nice observation on your part. It's Tony. Tony looks smart when he figures that it's the Sherlock Holmes thing. The reason that Sherlock Holmes is smart isn't because he's got big brain, high IQ. The reason Sherlock Holmes is smart is because he looks at details and he puts them together, and then he explains it to Watson what his brilliant reasoning is.
Right. All right. So, but then other people pick up that this is Stark Tech eventually.
I also kind of like the detail of, this is a post 9/11 comic, so you can kind of tell that terrorism and death is on a lot of comic writers' mind. They had a nice balance of, I don't know, like having the regular Joes respond to Iron Man, like, is he just here to grandstand? No, he's getting results and actually helping out. It kind of strikes this nice balance between the heroes being fun characters that aren't that realistic, while kind of like establishing that in the universe, even if there would be people who would kind of like roll their eyes at superheroes, they would also like earn respect by doing this kind of stuff. It reminds me a lot of Batman the Animated Series, right? Like they have the fun superheroic element, but they're adding just a little bit of real world seriousness that makes it feel like, this has impact on normal people's lives, what's going on.
Yeah, so this is Tony here confronting Nick Fury here. 7 years ago, the Pentagon asked me to design a new kind of anti-submarine weapon, a particle beam torpedo, and harness the momentary compression energy of an ultra-high explosive to generate a focused particle beam capable of slicing through the hull of a nuclear sub at a range of 5 miles underwater. So my question is, how did my design wind up slaughtering over 100 people at the Chinese embassy this morning? So,
and of course, Shield's asking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Shield is asking the same thing. How did that happen? Yeah. So then we get the news is now suggesting that Tony is a traitor who has sold off his weapons to America's enemies, essentially. So that is causing a lot of negative PR essentially. I
like some of the details that Tony.
And then we have this scene with
Tony loses his cool, which means he just stares down a reporter, and he kind of realizes, great, that's just going to like make the story go through another news cycle, right? So it's kind of like they're finding this balance where Tony does have like a bit of edge and a bit of impulsiveness to him, but it's not like stupid, like he punched the reporter in the face, exaggerated. It's just like a subtle thing that he made a small mistake, and that's going to make his problem worse.
Right. And also the detail of him thinking that he needs a drink, right?
Yeah.
Is also a good acknowledgement of his history too. Yeah, and this is him saying, "I just gave that show legs for another news right on camera, and you only took a poke at that guy from the Post." If we turn on CNN, I'm sure they've run the clip half a dozen times already. I've got to get my temper under control, save my anger for the culprits. Yeah, yeah. Tony does have a temper, so it's good that the writer here recognizes that. And it's just here's them talking about where the leak might have come from. And Tony's basically like, oh, it could be anybody. I have a lot of enemies. So then we start doing that investigation, right?
And Pepper's just kind of like a stable help to Tony, right? Like if Tony's the genius, Pepper's the common sense of the duo.
Right, right. He's not back from lunch. Drinking again? Still. And then this is where they have the conversation. They have the conversation they're having here is about the baby she lost, which she has not revealed to Happy. So they have this conversation. Tony tries to convince Pepper to tell Happy what happened. And here we learn that their marriage has been kind of going through a rough patch even before this happened, and she thought that if they had a baby, that maybe that would help the marriage, but of course, it is not to be. But the truth is, there's no cure for the one thing that's wrong with our marriage, which is between me and my husband. So she doesn't reveal to Tony what it is, but it's they're having problems basically. And so we have Tony tracking down Happy at the tavern here. And this scene is a really good kind of this is a good scene for the background soap opera here. Because this is just FYI, this is Tony taking a risk, actually going into a bar. Yeah. So the fact that he would do that on Happy's behalf, that actually says a lot about his friendship with Happy and his ability to care about a friend of his. That he would actually risk his own sobriety for a friend's behalf it's actually quite noteworthy. And so we have.
I even like some of the little details, like just looking at the alcohol. You can tell that's tough for Tony. Happy kind of knows that it's taboo for him to be offering Tony the drink. I think in a few pages before this, Tony said, I need a drink, right? Like they're doing some nice jobs of just reminding you of the alcoholic problem.
Yeah, right. And so they basically get into an argument. Yeah, oops, faux pas. And Tony says, I need you back sharp. You understand? Yeah, I understand, Sharp. Fine, let's go. As soon as I finish my drink. And we have Happy thinking, see, that's the difference between us, Tony. I can quit when I want, and I will when I want. And Tony's trying to convince him to stop drinking. And Happy thinks that there's some... And Happy says, "Oh yeah, I've had enough. All right, just about enough of whatever the hell is going on between you and Pepper." And it's not 100% unreasonable for Happy to be suspicious of that, because in the Tales of Suspense comics, as we'll see, Tony did have a thing for Pepper, and actually still does, like, to this day. So yeah, of course Happy is going to be suspicious if there's a lot of private conversation between Tony and Pepper going on about something he knows nothing about. That's the first thing he's going to think is, oh, Tony's moving in on my girl, because they've had that history. Right? So yeah, so I think I don't see the little looks, the conversations that suddenly stop whenever I walk in. Something happened, Tony. Sure, we had our problems. We were working on them. And then wham, she slammed the door between us. I'm tired of standing out in the cold. Well, all you have to do is knock, and she lets you in.
I kind of like the element of this that Tony's trying to be a good friend and help out, but it's sort of like some of Tony's problems are coming back to bite him. Like Tony being a ladies' man is kind of biting him here. Tony losing his temper and blurring things out is sort of undoing the good help he's trying to provide here. He's kind of making things worse.
Right. Yeah, look, why don't you two just get a room and get it out of your systems? Yeah, and then because Tony has a temper, he gets mad, and as you say, he blurts out what happened. So you're pickling your brain while she deals with it alone. Deals with what, Tony? She didn't want to disappoint you. She was afraid you'd blame her. But it was my fault. And he almost drinks. I'm not having this conversation with you now, Happy. Hey, pal, you don't just turn your back and walk away like that. Yes, I do, in fact. I turn my back on the people I love. I walk away when they need my help. So this is more of a Tony's guilt over bad things happening to his friends. So, already in this first issue for this arc, you see so much good character interplay going on here. And this is referencing what I was talking about before, the prior storyline. Aisha begged me to kill her to release her from the monstrous thing she'd become because of me, because I built a weapon just to see if I could. And when I refused to kill her, she found a way to make me hate her enough. She hurt Pepper. And you just had to ride to the rescue, the knight in shining armor. It was my fault. The baby died, and it was my fault. Baby, what are you talking about? So he blurts it out. Yeah. She was pregnant. She blurts it out, which Pepper, you knew and you never told me? You son of a bitch. And then Happy gets shot. And that's the end of the issue. Yeah. Oh, and then so the next issue starts off, picks up where this left off, with Happy being shot in the chest and Tony getting shot multiple times. So, the beginning of his bad week, he gets shot multiple times, and his friend gets shot, right?
It's adding a danger, the danger element right at the emotional climax. Great stuff.
Right. Yeah, it is very, very good stuff. And what's great about this whole opening in the second issue is that Tony's like bleeding and injured, but his first thought at all times is Happy. How's Happy doing? Right? So he's there trying to rescue Happy, trying to activate his armor, right? There goes his armor. He calls the armor. Fights the people who shot them. And then he barges into the hospital carrying Happy.
There's kind of a neat thing where they can't operate on him because he has armor on, so Pepper has to save his bacon that way.
Yeah. And then we have this. So he's just standing there. Mr. Stark, you'll have to wait outside. And meanwhile, just FYI, Tony himself got shot multiple times, so he's in the armor basically bleeding to death. And he's sitting here saying, I'm not leaving him. So Tony is more concerned about what's going on with Happy than what's going on with his own self. And then there's like, there's really nothing you can do here. That's my friend on the table. I'm not leaving, and you can't. And then he just collapses. And everyone's like, oh, my, holy cow, Maple tucked Iron Man. Because, of course, they didn't realize that, oh, actually, he's bleeding to death in that arc.
Nice little, it's a nice little down-to-earth human moment to, ease the tension a bit. And notice it's not a pop culture gag. It's a normal people misunderstanding a superhero situation gag. So it's hold up after all these years. Right.
And just the sincere, it's also a moment of sincere emotion too. He cares so much for his friend that he's ignoring his own damage on his behalf, right? And then, as you said, Pepper has to show up. Well, Pepper shows up for Happy, but she also has to be recruited to pop open Tony's tin can because he has all these protective things that make sure no one can take his armor without him being aware of it. So,
which I just realized this is an important foreshadowing for later. So really nice touch on the writer's part to illustrate that she can do this.
Yeah. So she pops him open. And oh my God, they discover it's pumping blood out of multiple gunshot wounds. So he's been shot multiple times. And basically the only reason why he was able to stay standing is because of the artificial heart he has currently. It basically sealed up some of the wounds. So that's
kind of a new thing, right? Like the artificial heart also doing a bunch of stuff to protect him from injuries and physical ailments. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I need a. Sorry, I was looking at the chat, and Karen says, I need a legacy Iron Man opinion on something. Why would Riri Williams have people from the future telling her she's destined to change the world beyond her comprehension, including Franklin Richards? Whatever happened to modern Obadiah Stane anyway, he'd be the first person I'd suspect if he was still alive. Warzord is right. Obadiah Stane is dead at this point. He was defeated in Iron Man 200. So there's not modern day. There's not Obadiah Stane. There are Obadiah Stane's heirs around. Maybe that's what you're thinking of. But Obadiah Stane himself was killed in the original Denny O'Neil run, at least if I recall correctly. So as for the Riri Williams question, why would Riri Williams have people from the future telling her she's destined to change the world beyond her comprehension, including Franklin Richards? I think that was really just Bendis's attempt to make Riri seem like she was important.
Sometime in the future, you're going to do something important.
Yeah.
You're a child of destiny.
It was a cheat, essentially. Instead of showing what she could do and what that could possibly mean, the implications of, we're just going to have some characters tell us how important she is. So it was bad writing on his part, for sure. Okay, so moving on. I just wanted to check in on the chat, see what we were doing here. So we have, and you're right, Marm, that the fact that Pepper can open his suit and has that access is in fact an important thing to know for something that happens later in the storyline. So, so Tony has to be worked on. And meanwhile, the Chinese government is still not satisfied with the answers we have been given. This weapon was commissioned by the Pentagon. It was designed by an American, Anthony Stark. It is an American weapon. So in the news, we're still applying the pressure on Tony because he's being blamed for this disaster. And that's going on while Happy and Tony are being worked on. And then we get
the son of the Mandarin. What's his name again?
Temagin, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. My brain suddenly short-circuited there, but yeah. Yeah. So the son of the Mandarin,
as we know from Tales of Suspense, the Mandarin he's no friend either of the old Chinese regime or of the Chinese Communist Party. He wants to be the ruler of China. So.
Right. Yeah, so we have the son of the Mandarin who basically feels that that he has, for family honor purposes, he has an obligation to kill Tony Stark and Iron Man just to settle his father's honor, essentially. But he's kind of an interesting character because he also has, like, he's a typical villain who has a code, essentially, in that there are things that he will not abide, or methods that he will not abide to accomplish his aims. Meanwhile, back at the hospital,
I guess a transgender assassin shows up. I didn't get the design.
I don't, just a really, really masculine woman. For sure. Oh, and then we have here, just to further reinforce that, Tony's first concern is not himself. As soon as he wakes up, hey, how's Happy? So it's not like, what happened to me? But his immediate thought is, how's Happy? And the doctor's like, well, first things first, how do you feel? I feel like getting out of here. So he's already he's ready to rip off all his monitors and just go pound some villains, right?
Very self-sacrificial aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe a little too self-sacrificial.
So the doctor's like, down. You may have paid for the swing, but I won't have you right away spoiling all my hard work. Quite a miraculous artificial heart, by the way. I'd tell you how quickly you're recovering, but it would only encourage you. Enough about me. I asked about Hap. Meanwhile, Nick Fury is there. Nick's saying, stay put. So Nick is helping to discover who it was that shot them. And he discovers that it was a North Korean operation, or apparently a North Korean operation, although it turns out later that it's a little more complex than that. Yeah.
Foreign policy. Actually,
foreign policy.
It's a little dash of foreign policy to make it seem all dangerous and cool. Policy. Yeah.
So it's revealed here that that Tony did make a deal with the North Koreans, but it was for peaceful reasons, and that it was done by the Clinton administration. So He's like, the president asked me to. So yeah, foreign policy coming in here. So through Suck, we sold them our photovoltaic energy technology. So he made kind of a peaceful business deal on the request of the Clinton administration. And then the guy's like, what else did you sell them, Stark? So they're all suspicious now because he has that business connection. And then we have Tony visiting an unconscious Happy. Happy you have to pull through. Okay, I'm begging you. Tony, you're in no condition to be up and about yet. Head back to bed. So again, yeah, what you're saying, the crazily, the insane self-sacrificial nature here is coming through quite well. And then here, Tony reveals that he told Happy about the pregnancy, which Pepper, yeah, rightfully interprets as a betrayal on his part. And as he's trying to chase her, he falls down because, of course, he's not well. And so we have him back in bed, and the doctor's like, take some sense into him. He should be up moving around. Yeah, classic Tony Stark. At the beginning of this volume, volume 3, there was another storyline where basically he was getting repeatedly injured, and his armor, for hand wave comic book science reasons, was actually inhibiting his ability to heal from his wounds. So the doctor's basically telling him, no, you can't use the armor, otherwise you're going to die. And still, he would put the armor on. Like, the level of lack of concern for his own well-being is quite intense. Rumiko, his girlfriend's like, I'm tempted to throw him out the window. How am I supposed to care about him if he doesn't care about himself? And then we have here, doctor, you've got me heavily sedated, haven't you? You shouldn't do that. I'm an alcoholic. I know. I read your chart. I promise you no one leaves my care addicted to painkillers.
Another nice little subtle reminder of that aspect of Tony.
Yeah. You don't have time to kill yourself. The drugs have me all scrambled. Help me think here, Rumiko. North Korea is totalitarian, paranoid. Lately, China's been leaning on them on our behalf. They don't like that. But risk making an enemy of their biggest, toughest neighbor? They're not that crazy. This is a frame job. So we have Tony figuring out that though it appears that the North Koreans are involved, there's something more going on here behind the scenes, because again, Tony is intelligent and he's able to put together the clues. And then the final scene of this issue is our transgender nurse / assassin, who in the dead of night attacks Tony in his hospital bed. So just to update the scorecard here, Tony has been shot multiple times. He has further injured himself by refusing to stay in bed, and now he has just been attacked in his own hospital room by an assassin. So, great week we're having here.
I also like to send off that the assassin gets all the way to poisoning him, and that's the end. Like, how's Tony going to get out of this one, gang?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that last image is kind of like the math meme of the lady with the math symbols all around her face.
Yeah. So the third issue opens with basically this fight as Tony fights to basically survive here. Wow, he gets his head clanged against the hospital bed, so that's good. So we got this really good fight going on here.
Oh yeah, and just as the assassin's about to commit suicide, which is what the first two did, Tony goes for the cyanide pill. So again, we've got this nice theme going where all the assassins are killing themselves, but then this neat twisteroo that Tony actually shoves his hand down Z-Zimzer's throat and gets it, right? So it's a twisteroo on the cyanide thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No cyanide for you. And I like this. I'm sick of assassins who won't stick around to answer questions. Yeah. So he manages to subdue Z-Zimzer. Yeah. And oh my God, people run in and see that he has been attacked. Are you okay, Mr. Stark? Oh, and he's like, memo to self. Next time someone tries to kill you, see to it you're already wearing your armor. He's there, like, clutching his armor. Yeah. The next day.
I like that gag, by the way, on that panel. I'm only paying one of you, Doc. Just like give Tony a little bit of I don't know, chipper smart aleckiness in the face of like all of this crappy stuff happening to him.
Yeah, and Doc's like, Tony, at the present moment, your banter is altogether too exhausting. There's nothing in your medical records about your being immune to potassium chloride poisoning. So we have here the explanation of why poisoning Tony didn't work, right? So the other thing that the artificial heart does is it protects him from poisoning. So the only thing it doesn't protect him from is alcohol. He was hoping he could adjust it so that alcohol wouldn't affect him. But then, as he said, he says, so I can touch all the poison arrow frogs I want, but a light beer can still wreck my life. Alas. Look, it's not safe here. I'm going to ask to be taken into S.H.I.E.L.D. protective custody. No chance. You're in worse shape now than when. What happens when they send a whole hit squad after me? I can't let my presence here endanger patients or caregivers. So this is Tony again, not being self-sacrificial and saying, other people matter more than me. I don't want to stay here just because you want me to stay here, right? And so we have the assassin being questioned.
And then mysteriously just giving up the goods way too easily. Yeah.
Right.
So kind of like relating back to the foreign policy mystery. There's the assassin saying, "Oh, it was the North Koreans," and then the FBI guy says, "Huh, well, we have this saying in the FBI: if you think someone is most likely to have done it, they probably did it." So they sort of instinctively say, "Well, we think it was the North Koreans, so we're going to investigate them." Tony kind of thought through the logic of the situation, and so he's acting on the theory it's not the North Koreans, right? So there's a nice contrast between the powers that be and Tony, the Chad genius, going his own way.
Mm-hmm. And we have Tony, the Chad genius, kind of messing up his personal life again. So here's him trying to talk to Pepper. Please, Pepper, you know what I have to do now. I can't do it distracted. I need to know I have your forgiveness. And Pepper's not ready to give it to him yet. You just have to forgive yourself this time, Tony. I don't know who I can trust anymore. And so here he is being taken into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody, but that doesn't work out either. As we see a couple of pages later, their vehicle gets attacked because nothing can go right in Tony's life right now. And so Tony, based on this, he says, based on this attack, I like this. My armor is ready to take a full-on hit from a Hellfire missile. The man inside the armor, however, is not.
Yeah.
So we have this sort of fight scene here. This next move, it too is going to hurt. So I love that, the writer is putting in the reminders that, but if I don't take the hit, the people and the traffic below will. I love that. And I love that the writer is reminding you the whole time that, oh, by the way, inside the armor, the man is seriously injured, and the armor on the outside may look like it is invincible, but inside he is in pain, right? And there's reminders of that all through this arc too. When he's in his armor, we'll get to it. There's a caption where he says, I feel something running down my arm. I'm guessing I'm bleeding again. So he's in this fight and he's bleeding inside the armor. I love that so much. One of the things that attracts me to the character to begin with is the fact that the armor is just an outer shell, and there's reminders all through his canon that the man inside is in fact incredibly squishy and vulnerable.
Yeah,
I like the aspect about that.
I had maybe like an Iron Man nerd question for you. Is this because he's injured under the armor, or is this because if you hit Iron Man with a powerful enough force, the armor will be okay, but it's sort of like you can shake him around inside it? So is it more of a physics thing, or is it more of a he's bleeding and injured thing? Like, does Tony have like a scientific, magic explanation for how he can like get hit by a missile and he's okay? Like he's like, oh, I have I don't know, like force stabilizers that protect me from being shaken around.
Yeah. Yes, he does have things built into the armor that presumably reduce the shock of being hit by thousands of tons of something. So in this case, I think it is primarily that that he was injured before he got into the armor. But I think even if he were in top and peak physical condition inside the armor, there is a limit. There are limits to what the armor can do or what the armor can protect him from. So there are times too where he'll be like perfectly healthy inside the armor, but if the armor takes a hard enough hit, or if somebody disables the armor in some way or whatever, there are weaknesses. There are ways to get at the man inside that that don't necessarily have to involve him already being injured when he shows up to the fight. Okay. So we have him fighting the people who have attacked the shield vehicle. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. There's something wet running down my arm. I think I'm bleeding again. I love that. He's in the middle of this this really grand epic fight here, but the writer is reminding you the whole time, oh, by the way, he's injured in there. Yeah. But he's still fighting anyway.
Something that stood out to me in this issue is that Tony goes to heroic, insane lengths to help the people he loves, but he also will make dumb mistakes that hurt the people he loves. So he's sort of caught between in this sort of tragic situation where he keeps doing one dumb thing that hurts his trust with his friends. Then he goes to these magnificent lengths to try to restore that. It's, I mean, like, he shouldn't be doing the dumb things, but he does. You have to. His character strength is that he is willing to do a lot to make up for that.
Yeah.
Up to killing himself in battle. Yeah.
Yeah. If need be. Yeah. Lad. I mean, man, one day we'll talk about Execute Program, which that's an arc that basically ends with him stopping his own heart. So, and for the sake of protecting people. So
yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we're really hitting at why I like this character so much, because he is very, very human and fallible and makes mistakes and has weaknesses and flaws and things that that drag him down. But as you said, he also has this magnificent strength of he always, when he makes a mistake or he screws up, he will go to whatever lengths possible in order to make up for it. Actually, like now that we're discussing that now, Civil War. So in the Civil War storyline, most of the people that I follow on YouTube perceive Tony to be the villain. But it's interesting to note that after that whole thing went down, Tony did not lead a happy existence. He was for the whole Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. period, when he was Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. against his own will. He was basically blackmailed into it. He's not happy. He's actually profoundly unhappy, and like cries over Captain America's death and all this other stuff. He's profoundly unhappy, and to the point of actual arguable mental illness. And basically the entire thing resolves when Osborn takes over S.H.I.E.L.D. And demands that Tony hand over all the information he has in his head about all the superheroes' secret identities and stuff, because he was in charge of that SHRA database, right? Tony decides that, well, the best way to solve this situation, because I'm not giving up this information for anything. The best way is I'm going to basically kill my own brain, damage my own brain, so that Osborn can't get at this information. So it's like, he does screw up and he makes wrong decisions, and does betray his friends because because he's making mistakes or not thinking things through, or maybe being a little bit too certain that he's right about something, right? But once he realizes that the mistake has been made, right, he does go to insane lengths to fix a mistake that he's made. So to suicidal lengths. It's actually literally suicidal. He will kill himself if that's what it takes in order to fix something that he's broken. So, so that really, it really does get to one of the core things I like about this character, besides the fact that he has this fundamental vulnerability from the moment he was conceived, right? And the connections that I've made in past streams to chronic illness, the fact that it's a way to talk about chronic illness, to represent chronic illness without being super obvious and 2x4ish about it. That attracts the character, of course. But the other thing is the sort of is what we've been talking about, the fact that that he screws up and makes mistakes, but he has this capacity for guilt and this desire for atonement so enormous that he will, in fact, kill himself if that's what it takes in order to fix something, fix a mistake that he has made. And there's just something very human and very powerful about that. So I have two choices. I can try to rescue the assassins inside this thing, or I can alter the copter's trajectory so it can't hit the cars below. And then he says, by way of apology, I'll have to send Nick a case of smoked salmon and a first edition Clausewitz. Technically speaking, I'm not free to go, but as this incident shows, this armor is the only custody I can rely on. So now he says, oh, now I basically have to go on the lam, right? Because he doesn't want anyone else to be endangered because of what's going on in his life. Yeah. Which is, again, like, that's him. He has this tendency that when he's having problems in his own life, his tendency is, I don't want anyone else to get mixed up in that. I'm going to deal with this alone. That's and that tendency gets him into trouble a lot too, because he'll try to do something on his own alone and not tell anybody what's going on in his life, right? And then everyone's like, well, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you, right? And then he'll always say, I don't want you to get mixed up in it. I didn't want you to, to be endangered by what I had to do, right? So, oh my gosh, I love this character so much. Anyway, so he basically leaves, goes on the lam, right? So he can investigate it in his own way without in his mind endangering anybody else. So he goes to the Suck estate to try to figure out what's going on. And we have these kind of regular Joe FBI agents here talking about how Neil just put out an arrest warrant on Tony Stark. So they're talking about how now Tony's a fugitive, right? And these regular Joes are like, I'm glad I'm not the one who has to slap the cuffs on him. Meanwhile, in the background, there he is.
Having the FBI after you is a great way to show how individualistic your character is, right? See, those 3 letters, glowies.
Yeah. So he shows up and says, I'm being framed alongside you. I'm here because you have a mole in your organization, someone with access to your fleet of vehicles and also your bank accounts. There is no such individual. And the guy you're torturing up on the 2nd floor, I suppose that's just an awkward coincidence. So the North Koreans are being very cagey about what's going on, right? But Tony's armor enables him to see that they do have somebody up there that they're torturing. And here come the cops, right? Out of respect, I have my hands up, but I can't afford to go with you. You know what happens if you don't surrender. You become a fugitive. Mr. Stark, you don't really want to lose everything you have, be hunted. I appreciate the concern. Tell your kid this will all make sense when I'm done. And he flees. And grabs the guy who's being tortured by the North Koreans.
I even kind of like in that interaction how he's actually concerned about how the dad has a kid who has an Iron Man action figure. So he knows he's going outside the law, but he doesn't want to be a jerk while he's going outside the law.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't believe it. The guy just cooked himself. If Neil didn't have a case before, he sure does now. And then we get to this scene where the FBI is basically turning the screws on Pepper here. And basically suggesting that she and her husband might be held partially responsible for the Korean deal that they're talking about here.
Yeah.
How can we be targets? We didn't do anything. How sure are you of that, Mrs. Hogan? You may be mixed up in something and not understand its significance. But if there really is nothing, well then no harm done, is there? So you're basically intimidating her by scaring her with the thought that she could be held responsible for this.
You mean the FBI would actually threaten innocent people with legal prosecution just as a way of getting them to turn? You can't be serious.
No, that can't be it. Yeah. And then he starts like playing on the fact that their life with Tony has been kind of eventful in the Chinese sense of the term. So it starts beyond protecting now. He had a chance to clear all this up, and instead he ran away, leaving you behind to clean up after him. Over the years, your loyalty to this man, your husband's loyalty, it's put you both through the meat grinder, hasn't it? And recently, he's betrayed you somehow. I won't guess the details, but I'm right, aren't I? As an intelligent woman, you know it doesn't work out that way, so pointlessly forced me to serve a warrant on a comatose man. So yeah, so the FBI is threatening her with prosecution and also poking her about what's been going on personally in her life. And she decides to cooperate and betray Tony. So, and that is the end of issue 3. I'm going to check the, all right, nothing new in the chat. All right. Yeah. So you mean the FBI would actually threaten someone with prosecution in order to get what they want? No, can't possibly happen. And so we see here that Pepper has access to something that basically shuts down Tony's armor, which she gives to the FBI under duress, essentially.
I love the detail that while she's kind of like unsure of this decision, all she asks the FBI to do is to not humiliate Tony, because the betrayal itself, she knows is going to crush him. So like, don't rub it in. Partially because she knows that Tony has a bit of an ego on him. Yeah, don't humiliate him.
Right. Meanwhile, blood from my arms now pooling in my glove. My gunshot wound reopened back over the Long Island Expressway. Hence the fainting. And this prisoner that he's captured starts talking about the 10 rings.
Mandarin, that's the clue, yeah.
Mandarin, yeah. You're going to tell me what you tell Suck. You're a double agent. You gave Suck's vehicles to the bomber and the hit team. You faked a payment from his company to mine. And so he's like desperate to actually torture this guy. Fingers are broken. You broke my fingers. I'll also break your tibia, fibula, and ankle bones. You don't tell me where I can find your boss. And we have more Mandarin talk here while he breaks his leg. I said, tell me where to find him. I already know who it is, you glassy-eyed chuckhead. Your particular brand of crazy talk comes only from one playbook, the Mandarin's. Since he's dead, that means you work for his son, Temujin. You've got guts. Kim Jong-il's torturers know their work, but you toughed it out. Kept your mouth shut for how many hours? 4. You've read up on me. You're imaginative. Think of what this armor can do to your body in 4 seconds. And then what happens is, his masters basically kill him so that Tony can get the information from him. Oh, and then it turns out when he opens his armor that it's more than he thought in terms of his injuries. Turns out it's not just the arm wound. Half my chest sutures are ripped out, right out. I'll have to keep the chest plate on just to stay upright. And this panel, an assortment of really nasty long-term health repercussions pertain here. Fortunately, my superhuman capacity for denial shields me from contemplating them, which I shared on Twitter as, this is quintessential Tony Stark. Right. Who cares about my own? Yeah. He got a capture of the signal. So now he's going to go follow that signal.
So one nice thing about this is he does all this sacrifice and it looks like he hits a dead end, like his lead is dead. But because he has a big brain, because being a big brain is part of who Tony is, he finds a way to keep moving his investigation forward, even when it looks like he has a cold lead. So nice touch there.
Yeah. All right. I'll get going in just a minute because he's not well. So now he goes on the lam. Curse my rich man's habit of never carrying any real cash. I can't use an ATM now. Credit cards are out. After accommodations, I'm left with an operating budget of $28.34. And he collapses on the bed.
So basically, homeless and poor Tony again, right? Like we're underscoring how pathetic the situation is. Yeah.
Yeah. And he shaves and dyes his hair. That's a fairly classic thing, or that happens. It's kind of a joke among Iron Man fans that every time Tony has to go on the lam, he dyes his hair blonde. Like, so he dyes his hair blonde so he can kind of evade capture here. I tune out the news anchor's blather. They're forgetting the crucial point. It's not about me. It's about all the people killed at the embassy. And he does kind of this little tech thing so he can contact his girlfriend, who apparently is being hassled by the FBI as well. And what is he calling her for? For Happy again. So it's like, so that single-minded focus on, is Happy okay? Is Happy okay? Yeah. Which Rumiko does not respond well to, because she's like, well, what about me? I'm your girlfriend, right? Yeah.
Rumiko is not ready for the roller coaster ride that is Tony Stark's life.
No, not at all. Not even a little bit. And here we have Pepper expressing to Happy how guilty she feels for betraying Tony. And Happy wakes up. All right, we get updated. Now it's been 3 days of him trying to track down this partial signal he captured. All right, it's been 3 days now of me pointing my scanner at every hinky-looking building I can find.
And you notice some suspicious-looking random posters hung up outside.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's being chased by cops. And during this chase sequence, he notices that they have his failsafe, right? I'm 80% sure I could get that failsafe away from him before he could use it. 80% isn't good enough. He falls through the floor, and he thinks, I betrayed her, she betrayed me. So he kind of perceives this betrayal as something that he kind of asked for by spilling the beans on her secret, right? I need to wear the armor to compensate for injuries. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, so this Mook, there's this nice little subtle thing where his father spent his whole life serving the Mandarin and has kind of like passed on this dream to his son where, my father spent all his life wanting to see the Mandarin, so I guess I'll work all my life wanting to see the guy who takes over the Mandarin's business, right? And so Tony says, well, that doesn't make any sense. You're not Chinese. We invented intergenerational guilt. It's a nice subtle thing where like the Mook has a sort of like a dream and a personality and a culture and an identity, right? And even he's kind of like self-aware about how this is a bit of a silly dream, and he's kind of annoyed now because now that he's out of favor with the Mandarin's crew, he wants to basically quit his job and burn down the building on his way out. So he's going to turn stoolie to help Iron Man out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and that deal with the weird posters, it was basically a chemical agent. So a normal person looks at little chemical symbols. They don't know what that means. Tony looks at it and he says, that's the guy who tried to poison me in the hospital. So I like how it's a big brain thing where Tony understands chemistry, so he knows what that means. And it's a simple thing where it's just like, well, I'll just hang up posters everywhere so Tony will see them with a message that only he will know.
Yeah. And I love that the whole time He's like barely standing upright here. And he's like, I'm getting nauseated. So one more question. Let's wrap this up. And when he gets all this information from the Mook, right?
He does the old Bugs Bunny. You have a bomb in your brain. Here, take this. What? Zap.
Yeah. Zap, yeah. Maybe I should pin a note to him explaining there's no bomb. I'll let him work it out on his own. And then he pukes up blood, basically. Pushing myself too hard. But he keeps going. I'll have to get Temujin's location out of him some other way. And there he is. So this issue ends with, at last, the final confrontation is at hand, right? Okay, so now we get the final issue of this arc.
So it's a great fight, and I like how issue 5 basically opens with Tony saying, on my best day, this guy could give me a run for my money, and I'm currently bleeding out, and I wasn't expecting to have to fight this guy right away. So it's a great little opening act that makes the villain seem tough and makes you say, oh, great, how's Tony going to get out of this one? Always good to have open up right away with that tension.
Yeah, so I knew the day would come when I'd have to fight Temujin again. I spent countless hours performing upgrades and simulations. Now the moment is here, and I'm not prepared at all. Temujin's rested and ready. The only thing I'm ready for is intensive care. Yeah. Yeah, so that's great how it opens with, this is a fight that has some stakes in it because Tony is not in his peak condition, right? Yeah, and it is a great fight.
And also a nice thing where Tony's a scientist and Temujin is a kung fu chi warrior. So Tony makes energy shields, and he says, but I have power over chi, and so that means your artificial shields are lifeless to me. I like that kind of like mystical versus scientific vibe they've got going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's it is a great fight that is basically between equals, but equals that have different powers. So again, as you say, is that that contest between science and mysticism. And now comicsology is decided on me, so that's good.
Gotta do the screenshot trick like I do. So you're offline with your comics, yeah.
Yeah.
Buy Comicsology, kids. You'll get a ring of death, even if your Wi-Fi is good.
Yeah. So, all right, hang on. Usually, what works is exit the reader and then turn it back on.
Okay.
Let's see.
Or can you turn off guided view? Could that be adding to the problem?
No, I've been on pages anyway.
All right.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll come back in just a minute.
Let me see if I can pull it up on my end just in case. Well, we'll try for 2.
Yeah. There we go. I'm
all right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in page view right now. And basically what ultimately happens is we discover that one of Temujin's underlings
one of Temujin's underlings is responsible for the death of these innocent people without his knowledge. Yeah. And since he's a villain with a sense of honor, that's like a big deal to him. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to say before my brain short-circuited. So, yeah, so this guy. Yeah, Poe is the one who orchestrated the deaths at the embassy, and Temagin was unaware, right? So, new strategy: when you're on the floor and something interesting is happening, stay on the floor.
Smart thought, yeah.
Well, smart thought. And Poe thinks that Temagin has been weak and hesitating and vacillating. So I pushed you to this confrontation. I've destabilized Asia as your father's plans demand. I've lured this killer to you so you could slay him. And what do you do with these boons with the empire your father left you? Nothing. And stabs him in the back, which is very symbolic. Nice. Because you are nothing. And if that is true, all of us who have so long scraped and sacrificed, and we are also nothing. Traitor. Guess not all those guys attended the meeting, huh, Poe? Thing is, it's not their justice I want you to face. And he grabs him and basically forces him to confront what was done at the embassy. I should be on the verge of collapse. Instead, I feel energized. Later, my body will punish me for this, but for the moment, I'm running on a full tank of righteous rage. So, but the key thing to point out about this is that we've had this, this epic, very good fight, and in the end, Tony doesn't win. He doesn't win the fight. The only reason that he was able to survive the fight at all is that Poe intervenes, right? So
because he was pushing himself too hard. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was pushing himself too hard. Yeah, exactly. Because he's basically dying in there in that armor. Basically brings Poe to the embassy and demands he explain. How does any man bring himself to do a thing like this? I realize clinically you probably count as a psychopath, but that's not what I'm asking. Do you not get that these are real people? Or does that not even enter into your calculation? What's the thought process, Bo? Just once, I want one of you mass murdering creeps to try and explain it to me. All lies, my own, most of all, are immaterial. The likes of me. Go ahead.
For Tony, this has always been about help, because he's a compassion-driven character. He's been pushing himself to these extreme lengths because of the compassion he has for these innocent victims. For a lot of superhero characters, like a bunch of people dying at the start could just be the start of an adventure. Well, yeah, of course I want to bring the bad guys to justice. But for Tony, that has such a significant personal impact on him that it's pushing him to go beyond the law. It's pushing him to these insane lengths, and it's almost pushing him to his death. So that personal element is something that's separating Tony from a lot of other superheroes who also go out and bring bad guys to justice, but maybe they don't have that same kind of internal trauma, or he feels the tragedy of it really harshly.
Right. Which goes to what I said on Twitter a couple days ago about how, I was selling this trade because this trade came out a couple weeks ago also. This has not only this is in is not only the Manhunt Arc, but also basically the entire run of Micro, who did the Volume 3 issues 50 to 69. And this is basically the climax of his run, but there's so much good stuff in the rest of the run too. So I was trying to sell it on Twitter. Please buy this trade. Buy this trade. It's really good. And one of the things I said in my comments is, some of the guys I follow on YouTube might find this version of Tony a little bit too soft for them. But in my opinion, I think it does fit. I think he is one of the more emotional one of the more emotional heroes in the Marvel universe. So the fact that he is emotion driven here makes sense.
It's also
I think that the go ahead.
It's interesting to me that Tony is an intelligent, emotional guy, where the standard thing is always, well, the intelligent guy is cold, rational, and emotionless. And it also it maybe fits with his alcoholism, that he struggles with addiction, and he has a highly emotional sensitivity in the way he looks at the world. So some of the little details of his character fit nicely together. I don't know, that's something that's striking me in some of these later books that I haven't noticed as much in the Tales of Suspense books, where he's still very much, he's more of a standard superhero character in the older books. So it's interesting to kind of see these other dimensions emerge in the later ones in the 2000s.
Yeah. Although, even in Tales, you do see like the hints of this is the type of character that's intended, right?
Yeah.
When we get to Tales 63, you'll see some aspects of that. But basically, what I think we've said before, that Stan Lee's initial run planted some seeds, right? That then later authors they saw that seed and they say, oh, well, let me let this flower a little bit more completely, and so then you get, by the Bronze Age, the writer, it really was there by the Bronze Age, this kind of this emotional aspect of the character was there in the Bronze Age. And that's because the writers kind of notice, the seeds in Tales that they could develop and improve upon, right? And you said that the alcoholism is connected. Yes, that's what I said. That's what I said on Twitter too. The fact that he feels that this character feels things so intensely is going to make it very logical that he would want to seek some sort of escape from that. And that's what the alcoholism is his attempt to, poor attempt to manage what he feels, right? So it does all fit together quite beautifully. Oh yeah, and Poe tries to blow himself up, and it doesn't work, haha, because Tony has disabled it. Yes, and then here in kind of the epilogue, he gets his failsafe back. What
I forgot to mention this, but throughout that fight with the FBI, he recurringly had this thought: I betrayed her, she betrayed me. That kind of underscored not only is he realizing that, but it hurts him so much that he has to repeat it to himself, almost like he's trying to cope with that realization. So that was a nice touch.
Yeah. And here you see him, him with Pepper. Pepper, everything's all right now. Like I was saying to Hap, I'm just grateful he's improving. And other than that, let's leave the rest for later. The only thing that matters is that we all made it through. We made it. You don't have to say that. You've got every right to think I let you down, because I did. Strike got me worried for Hap, but I should have been stronger or cleverer. Shh, let's not talk. Everything's all right. So Tony's ready to instantly forgive her because he knows that he betrayed her as well by betraying her confidence. So,
and then just like a weird pause where, like it's still underscoring that Pepper's married to Happy, but there's like this weird kinship between. It's not sexual, but just the fact that Pepper and Tony are close makes the whole situation kind of weird for all three of them.
I don't know that it's not sexual. Actually, Tony does have revealed earlier in this trade, Tony does still have some lingering sexual attraction to Pepper. So that does kind of add to the awkwardness. He's just very carefully not acting upon it.
Yeah.
Right. It's just something that is relegated to his fantasy life, essentially. So it's not wholly non-sexual. There is a sexual component to it, but it's one that they are very carefully keeping under control and sublimating, essentially.
Right.
So that kind of contributes to the awkwardness that you're seeing. So, and we also have Rumiko walking out because, yeah, as you said, she's just not ready to handle the wild roller coaster ride that is Tony Stark's life.
And a nice little closing scene where the bad guy comes and pays his respects at essentially the ground zero and explains, well, I'm not giving up my organization, but I plan to bring about my changes for the world in a non-violent way. And Tony just kind of wants him to like give up the supervillain business entirely. So it leaves some like open questions about what this is going to mean for the future. Is like the Mandarin's organization become more of a force for good, or maybe like more of a neutral anti-hero force in the world? And it kind of the theme is the death of the innocent people isn't just the inciting incident for an adventure story. The death of the innocent people is everything in Tony's mind. So it's really appropriate that we end with kind of like a memorial moment for them. And I think I said before, this feels like a post-2001 comic. It actually kind of gave me flashbacks to reading, post-2001 comics as a kid. And sort of that was a way of, I think for a lot of kids of that age, that was kind of almost a way of coping or trying to understand what happened. Is you saw it affected even like the superheroes' lives that you like. So it kind of brought home to you that this was a real thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Zoomers won't get it. Yeah.
Zoomers won't get it. Yeah. Zoomers won't get it. Yeah. To them, that's history, not something that we actually experienced. Yeah. I'm double checking. Like, I mean, this was released on, May 26th this year. This trade, but yeah, I believe you're right that these were
2003, I think.
2003, yeah. So close to. This volume 3 ends in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, 2002, 2003 is when these were out. So.
So next up is Tales of Suspense number 63.
So traveling back further time, now we're like almost 60 years ago.
Power up the Mandalorian.
That's why. Okay, so now we get to more of the beginning. All right, so we start off here.
So in
we have to start off by resolving. Yeah.
Oh yeah. What happened with Tony Stark's secret identity issues? Yeah.
Yeah. So the previous issues, which we've covered in previous streams, Tony was having secret identity issues because he couldn't take his armor off. So basically, his friends were suspicious of Iron Man because they thought Iron Man had done something to Tony Stark. So we have to start this issue, first of all, by resolving that. So he says here that on his flight back from the last issue, he finally figured out a way to resolve his armor issue, his basically power supply issue. And then we have this kind of dramatic moment where once he's kind of tinkered with the armor and fixed it, he now has to, face up to the fear of actually taking off the power pods, right? And it works. So he is able eventually to fix the armor. So now he can come back and beat Tony Stark without complications ensuing. which he does. And everyone's like, oh my God, we thought you were dead. Yeah. And Pepper faints. And then we have here the way he's looking at her. He loves her too. I should have guessed. So we have here so we know. So we looked at the Manhunt arc that there is between the three of them this kind of weird awkwardness because both of the men in this kind of triad here have feelings for the woman, right? That are there under the surface. Well, the writers are directly pulling from what Stanley established in his initial Tales of Suspense run, that there's this sort of love triangle going on between the three of them. Tony's into Pepper, Happy's into Pepper, and they're basically competing for her affection, essentially.
Yeah. Pepper's into Tony, but Tony's into Iron Man, so Tony can't be with her when he's Iron Man.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I have no right to stand in their way. If not for me, Pepper might marry Happy. I don't dare marry because of my injured heart. Pepper must never know that I love her too. The only way I can prove my love is to give her up, to let her find a new life with Happy. So we have that soap opera that Stanley has provided there.
By the way, I don't think I got a chance to say this about something about the Manhunter arc. Is I appreciated how Happy and Pepper were married, but marriage wasn't a happily ever after for them. It was like I feel like comics in the 2000s had a nice emphasis on these characters getting married, but then also having problems in their relationship that they had to work through, like adults. So it's a nice development. If the Stan Lee era is kind of the fun, cute teenage romantic triangle, the 90s and 2000s, we started having maybe a bit more of a mature, marriage is tough and you got to work through it, kids, vibe to a lot of those comics. So it was it was interesting going back in time and seeing how that all connected. Yeah.
Yeah. And Manhunt is not the first time that they've had problems in their relationship, by the way. In the 70s, Pepper started becoming more feminist, I would say, in the sense that she decided that she wanted to be her own woman and be a career woman and stuff like that. And Happy had some trouble adjusting to that, so they had some problems with their relationship in that period too. So so definitely not the first time. But you're right, I like to when comics acknowledge that you can be married and yet still have conflict. I think that a lot of current day writers that are sitting there breaking up people's marriages are kind of mistakenly believing that if you don't have if you have a basically healthy relationship, that means you can never have conflict. No, it doesn't work like that. Marriage is not that easy, right? Dan Slott on Twitter, this passed across my awareness a few weeks ago. Someone asked him, why can't your Fantastic Four have healthy relationships? And Dan Slott was basically like, who would read that? And then, someone directly responded to him and said, okay, raise your hand if you would like to see people in healthy relationships. To which I said, I'm raising my hand because and maybe this is just because I grew up in the context of a healthy marriage and saw how a healthy marriage functioned. I understand intimately just my own experience, my own witness of how my parents interacted with each other, that that marriage doesn't, being in a happy marriage, being in a healthy marriage doesn't mean that you don't argue or you don't have conflict or you don't have things that can trouble you in your life, right? That in fact, as marriage proceeds, it's inevitable that you're going to run into sickness, right? And like your spouse's sickness is in fact something that can provide drama in the context of a healthy relationship. You can have like the issues of just when you're married to someone, that doesn't mean that you agree 100% with them all the time. I've also watched my younger brother is married, and I've watched him interact with his wife. They have a healthy, successful marriage. And one thing I noticed about them is they don't agree all the time. They get into little fights. And because when you have committed yourself living with another, like a completely separate human being for the rest of your life, right? That completely separate human being is not going to mesh perfectly with you because he or she is a completely separate human being, right? So you're going to clash occasionally because you have slightly different opinions or slightly different ways that you want the house to be managed. It happens. It's natural. It's inevitable. It's an inevitable part of marriage because you are trying to negotiate with another person about how we are going to live. So like this concept that some of these new writers seem to have, that if you're in a happy marriage, that means conflict never happens. That's clearly reflecting that they've never been married or they've never seen how healthy marriages work.
I think the balance that you want to strike. I mean, you could write about an unhealthy marriage as a plot point in a story, right? But for kind of like for character, if you want to talk to your audience like they're adults rather than introduce drama just to pretend it's adult, then something like they have a conflict. It's a negative conflict. They need to work it out. Maybe it's a bit more like how they approach the conflict. So the hyper dramatic way would be, a guy picks up things and starts throwing lamps through windows and things like that. That adds a lot of drama to the scene, but that takes away from us being able to see the characters as adults. If there's some disagreement, whether it's about like raising the kids or, the superhero antics, they can, when they dialogue, even if they're miscommunicating or if there are ways they're acting immature, watching them dialogue and work that out, it kind of becomes a way for kids to, I don't know, see how adults have to work through an issue with hopefully with reason, or if emotion is getting in the way of reason, they kind of have to realize how their emotions are getting in the way of reason. I think that Spider-Man and MJ's marriage was a great example of that, because they were constantly having, arguments over, Spider-Man taking away too much time from the marriage, and there would be like conversations. It was always through conversation they'd have to work through that problem. So it's a thing I miss about kind of like 90s and 2000s era comics, is the adult conversation, even if the adults have flaws that are creating the difficult conflict. I always bring it back to Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has the argument that the reason you want to have that conversation is if you don't, then the problem will kind of like multiply by 1,000 every single day. Yeah, the undone dishes will get more annoying every single day for years and years. Yeah.
And I just like to point out that we read Manhunt that Pepper and Happy were going through a definite rough patch in their relationship, but I just like to note for the record that they did not get divorced because of it. They still remained married, and the only reason that Pepper is not with Happy now is because Happy died in Civil War. So. So this was a marriage that stayed together till death do us part, essentially, even though they had these rough patches. So, so the upshot of this discussion is basically no, modern writers, you can keep characters married and in mature relationships without sucking all the conflict out of it, And if you think otherwise, like I said, you probably just don't have a lot of life experience when it comes to marriage, because those of us who have actually witnessed healthy marriages at work, we see that conflict is inherent to marriage. But if you're in a healthy relationship, you eventually work it out, right? And my brother and his wife, when they get into a fight, eventually when they figure out some way to work out the fight, like, you, love you. Like, even though we just fought, I still love you. Like, you know. Yeah. Okay, so so we have this kind of teenage love triangle thing going on, and the way that Tony decides to resolve this is he lies to Pepper and Happy and declares that he's engaged to be married.
Come on, Tony.
I wanted to keep it secret. She's a debutante from Boston. That's where I've been. So this also like resolves the question of where has he been all this time too. So he's come up with this grand lie to explain why he's been missing all this time, and then also it's also him basically throwing himself on the sword and saying, "Let Happy have her," right? So it's great. It's great. Yeah. The boss is alive. He was just too rich to die. And you can see here that kind of the regular Joes associated with the factory kind of mistrust Iron Man a little bit still.
There has to be so it's not just a relationship element. There's also like being Iron Man creates problems for Tony in his relationships. It creates problems for Tony in fighting supervillains, and it creates problem for Tony in how he interacts with the rest of the world. Yeah. So if you only had one of those elements, it'd be a little too limited. Like it'd be all superhero heroics, or it'd be all soap opera drama. And sort of like when you have all three of those elements working together, you get you kind of get the opportunity for multiple threads or multiple things to be happening at once to make the story a bit more interesting.
Okay, and then here we get introduced to Birch, someone who works at the factory, and Tony's like, "Sorry, Birch, I have more urgent things to deal with now. Check with me next week." So he keeps giving this guy the brush off. Yeah, not like in an intentional way, but it's just that, he's so busy, he just doesn't have time for him. And this guy takes it personally, as we'll see. And he's taking a tour of his factory, making sure everything is still working out well. Meanwhile, he's still thinking in his head, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. When he really doesn't really love Happy. Who am I to decide they should marry? And now that she believes I'm engaged, she's behaving differently towards Happy they do love. Oh, Pepper, my darling, if only that could be my arm you're holding. But you must never know how much I truly love you. So we have the unrequited love. I love you.
You can tell that I think even Stanley had a joke at some point. Unless you think you're reading a romance comic, here's some action. There we go. Yes, before you think you bought a love magazine by mistake, which was his history before writing a lot of these, was writing the romance ones.
Yeah. And I, in previous streams, I've kind of referenced this caption in the past, just talking about how the kind of avuncular way that Stanley talks to you when he writes. This is a classic example of it. Like the self-awareness of it. But now, before you start thinking you bought a love magazine by mistake, we change our scene to another part of the huge factory where we get the action. Because here's the villain, right? All I need to do is plant this camouflage time bomb in the right place and then fade back into the shadows. I better get right there as Iron Man.
It bothers me how close Tony Stark's company is always getting to being bankrupt, usually by one guy can bring Tony Stark's whole conglomerate empire to its knees. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I've actually joked. I've joked on social media before that, like, if there was such a thing as websites in this time period, like some joker probably would have made a website that entitled "Is Stark Industries on Fire.com," and then yes, no, because. It does happen so much that It's legitimately a trope for this comic. Yeah. Yes, so one person with a well-placed bomb can bring Stark Industries to its knees, which is kind of funny. Where's Iron Man going? He'll be roasted alive. And he discovers that the remnants of the bomb that caused this fire has his tech in it. Right? It's one of my own component parts, but how could the saboteur have gotten hold of it unless... So he's already figured out that it's an inside job at this point, right? Yeah.
And also kind of like there's this nice pattern of Tony having to figure out what's going on in his own company. Like even in the last one with the Manhunter arc, like how did they get my designs? How did this guy get my tech? So that always adds a nice connection between his business life and his superhero life.
Right. Yeah, and then we get this summary that, you know, for the next several days, there are more basically incidents of sabotage. Yeah, and so we get because this sabotage is happening, now we're threatening the company's defense contracts, right? And fully aware of the seriousness of the situation, one man works around the clock to catch the Phantom. I dare not rest for a minute. And then an intruder. This is kind of funny. The intruder. So he gets hit with this booby trap. And now he's getting, you know, his workers union is coming after him too. I can't allow the lives of our union workers to be endangered. Either you find a way to catch the Phantom and end these accidents, or we'll call a strike. So, like, because of this, like, the government is threatening to cancel his defense contracts, and his own workers union is threatening to strike.
And it gives him a deadline, which makes it all feel much more tense. Yeah,
exactly. And then he says, I don't blame them for the concern, but a strike will ruin me. I must stop the Phantom somehow. Once again, the mighty Golden Avenger patrols every inch of his vast, complex munitions factory, though his limbs are aching from lack of rest and his head is throbbing from the overlong wearing of his iron mask. So, yes, another classic caption there. Another classic quintessential Iron Man caption of... I posted another one on Twitter that was basically kind of like this in tone. It was basically inside the armor, he is suffering is essentially the concept. I'll find it. It was... Oh yeah, but in the life of the armored adventure, some things like rest and a chance to heal one's wounds are just not meant to be. Yeah, I posted that as this is a quintessential Iron Man. That was from Iron Man 97, but yeah, even this early on, we had this.
It's not fun to be in a giant tin can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, another 24 hours and the strike will be called. Then this whole industrial empire will collapse around the ears of Stark and Iron Man, and the Phantom will have won. There's someone near me. But what he finds is Happy. Oops. Happy, but what are you doing skulking around here in the dark? How do I know you're not the saboteur? Cool it, you walking junk pile. I was looking for the Phantom to help Mr. Stark like you should be doing. And then, hey, up there. So that's kind of funny that Happy decided that he was going to go off on his own and see if he could find him, right?
Good old reliable Happy helping out Mr. Stark.
Good old reliable Happy. Yeah. All right, Happy. Now take off. I'm gonna take over now after he smothers the bomb that was thrown at him.
So this moment, I thought there was something that looked like it could be an interesting, like maybe there was a miscommunication between the writers and artists. So Iron Man holds his hands out to the side in like a couple panels here. And it looks like what Stanley wanted was for him to surrender and then do the trick where, aha, I fired my lasers just in the right place. And the artist interpreted it as his arms straight out to the side. So Stanley had to go into the script and fix it. I don't know. It just struck me as like, I bet this is a moment where the Marvel method had made Stanley have to do like a quick fix, because he'd be asking the artist basically to just kind of like interpret the scene, which means sometimes a little thing could get lost in translation. The other famous one is what's his name? Giant Man slapping his wife across the room. That might have been caused by a miscommunication between the writer and the artist too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you're talking about this. I'm not trying to stop you. Look, my arms are outstretched in opposite directions. Yeah. And he smothers another bomb with his gloves.
With the powers of his transistors, which almost defy description.
Yeah, with the power of his transistors, yeah. Yeah, applies transistor-powered concentrated pressure, the force of which almost defies description. Yeah, we love these magical transistors. Using my transistor-powered flying jets, I'll follow him to the edge of infinity if need be. This time he won't escape. Oh, we have a moon missile.
I like this little detail. He can't fly and catch him because things are too tightly constrained for him to move around while flying, and he's too heavy to climb the ladder.
Yeah. As I reach the thinner braces up above, my very weight may crack them, damaging the missile. Yeah. If you can't escape, I'll be waiting. Says to figure out another way. By going outside to fly up. And he basically separates the top capsule here. You wanted a ride, so you're getting one. And he basically like shakes him out like it's a, you know,
giant cup or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Grab him. And then this is when we reveal that the Phantom was Birch, the guy that he was constantly brushing off. Like,
you didn't listen to me when I said I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah. I couldn't even get to speak to you when I wanted to. It was always later, Birch. When I get the time, Birch. I wanted to be noticed.
Notice me, Tony Senpai.
Yeah, notice me, Tony Senpai. Yeah. And then we have, boss, is it okay if I use one of your cars? Pepper and I are going to do the town. Sure, kids, have a ball. You deserve it for the way I pitched in during my absence. So this is I think Punchy would call this one of Tony's cuck moments, where he lets his romantic rival use his car. Yeah. And then
that's his way of showing his love to Pepper.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I accomplished what I wanted. Pepper has given me up because of my quote-unquote engagement. Now Happy is free to try to win her for himself. The Phantom is captured and everything's fine. So why is my heart so heavy? Why does the night seem so bleak and endless?
I don't believe it. Iron Man in a modern Iron Man comic. How could they get away with that?
Yeah. How could they? All right. So, any final thoughts before we close for tonight?
Fun collection. It was fun for me seeing the 2000 comics as well, because they just had a noticeably different vibe than the 2020 and 2021 comics. like the pattern always seems to be spreading out, farther and farther and farther, and dragging the story out longer and longer and longer. The tales basically condensed a whole story into like 12 pages. So the other 12 pages could be for Captain America. The 2000 comics, a single story stretched across 5 issues, but kind of like with an epic scale to it. And then Modern Iron Man, 9 issues in, we're still waiting for the final conflict and to finally wrap up our thoughts. So I'm more of a fan of the tightly packed pacing, but it is kind of interesting to see how, I don't know, in the 2000s there were slight adjustments to the Marvel style, but maybe still like a core good guy fights bad guy element underneath it. Whereas in the Cantwell run, it's a little bit more of a rumination on religion and is there a God, and will we ever escape the madness of human existence to it. So I'm not too hopeful for the end of Cantwell's run, but I've stuck it out this long, and I want to see maybe if he can stick the landing, maybe it'll be the start of something better. But I'm still annoyed about this sidelining Tony Stark thing in the new comics.
Yeah, and I of course am annoyed as well. So sidelining Tony, and and he didn't get off to a good start either. Like, to have like the first couple issues be basically ruminations about how privileged Tony is really stuck in my craw, because I mean, everyone knows, they probably watch anyone who's like a subscriber has probably seen my videos on those early issues, and how much they just don't, how much they completely ignore Tony's entire history, essentially. That I mean, you have scenes where like Patsy is telling Tony, well, you'll never understand what it's like to be suicidal or whatever. She says that, and I'm sitting there going, what? You're talking to the guy who almost killed himself via exposure because he had made such a wreck of his life that he felt he did not deserve to live. You're telling him this guy, that he doesn't understand what it's like to be suicidal, or that he doesn't understand what it's like to be kind of on the bottom rung of society without having any resources or anything to his name, when there was that whole period in the 80s where he was homeless. Of course he knows what it's like to be at the bottom of society. That's part of what makes the character who he is. So yeah. So anyway, he's privileged. He doesn't understand. He's out of touch. Hello. Like, no. His life story includes times where he's been at the bottom and has had nothing, and then he rises above that. Right.
Don't lose track of who a character is. Yeah.
Don't lose track of who a character is. Make sure you understand thoroughly his history, and don't accuse a character who almost died homeless in a blizzard of not understanding what it's like to have nothing. And I think we'll end on that note. So thank you to those of you who decided to watch this live. And for those of you who are watching this asynchronously later, thank you again for listening. And we will talk more about Iron Man in our next Iron Man stream.
Bada bing, bada boom. Looking forward.